We all know how satisfying it feels to be at the end of a day that we're really proud of. Some combination of motivation and pure luck made everything come together perfectly and you just totally crushed it. Everything you wanted to achieve that day was achieved. On days like this, each one of us is able to end the evening enjoying some well-earned fun while basking in the glow of how impressed we are with ourselves. That kind of day is something we'd like to have all the time. We all want the feeling of having completed a day, instead of the day just ending with the feeling of having been interrupted by becoming too tired to continue. But having a day like this is usually a completely random process that relies on having a ton of luck. This video is about the ways you can make them happen intentionally. The first part of feeling like you've completed a day is setting the right objective for yourself. If what you're aiming to do with a day isn't significant enough, you'll still feel unsatisfied with yourself even after you finish it. Whereas, if the objective is too demanding, you're at high risk of feeling like a miserable failure when you fail to complete it. So if your goal is to write 50 words or read a single page of a book in a whole day, then you're not going to feel all that accomplished even after you complete that goal. Whereas if you set yourself a really ambitious goal, like writing 5,000 words or reading 5 chapters of a textbook in one day, you could still end up making yourself feel bad about falling short of that target even if you've made great progress. Both of these situations happen to us constantly because of something called the planning fallacy. This is the idea that when we do new things, we have no idea how much time and effort they will take or what surprises will spring up along the way. The last time I wanted to learn a fancy new video transition, I thought to myself, this can't be too complicated, it'll only take me a few minutes. Yeah, it turns out that idea was just pulled out of thin air based on nothing, and I spent the best part of an hour adjusting various animations. And that was something relatively simple, where I had lots of tutorials available to show me exactly what to do. With completely new things, all kinds of unexpected situations can turn up to make things take longer. When you're doing anything that you haven't already done before, you don't know how much you don't know. And because of our own flawed expectations, we end up feeling dissatisfied with ourselves when we try and push ourselves in a new direction, which is the opposite of how we should feel, because going beyond our previous limits is the thing we should be doing the most of. The way to fix this issue is to change the objective to something we have absolute control over, by focusing on our input instead of the output of our efforts. You don't actually have control over how well something you work on turns out, but the effort you put in is entirely up to you. So if you define completing a great productive day as putting in a great effort, then you can have a great productive day without needing to rely on luck. Of course, in reality, the results of our efforts are always going to matter to us. No matter how much we tell ourselves otherwise, we're not going to be satisfied with putting in a great effort if we have nothing to show for it afterwards. The way to make your efforts produce real results more often is to use a type of work pattern called deep work. This term comes from a book by the same name and involves relatively short periods of intense concentration with no distractions. Somewhere from 45 minutes to an hour is about right. This type of intense focus is extremely valuable because it lets you achieve way more in far less time. It turns out that people usually waste so much time being distracted that when they switch to short bursts of intense concentration, it's not uncommon for them to get what used to be a week's worth of really important work done in only a few hours. The number of successful, focused, deep work time blocks you do is actually the best measure of a successful day there is. And focusing on this metric will produce better results than focusing on the results from the start ever would have. You should start doing deep work time blocks as early as possible, because the earlier in the day you do something, the more energy you'll have, and the better you'll be at doing your task. We're all familiar with what happens when we don't start early. We'll sit there at the beginning of our free time thinking we should do something productive, but then we'll continually put it off. The longer we do this, the more guilty we start to feel about not having done anything, and the more our energy levels crash as we sit there, not working, but not able to enjoy doing anything fun or relaxing either. Instead, just passing the time in a state of guilt-fueled frustration. To stop this from happening, you'll need to realize that this pattern of procrastination is a habit that was built up over time. And the way to break that habit is to do something else during that time instead. Something unrelated to your work that you never usually do. I used to have this exact problem myself. I knew what I wanted to do, but instead of doing it, I'd sit staring at my computer screen doing aimless web browsing for hours before actually getting started with anything. This changed when I started running each morning. At first, I wasn't very good at it. Every time I went out, it was a struggle, and each run probably wasn't worth that much as a workout on its own. But there was something more important going on than what I was doing, and that's what I wasn't doing. I wasn't spending hours aimlessly browsing the web before I started using my time intentionally, and this allowed me to overcome procrastination and start working towards the things that matter to me. My new behaviour served as a pattern interrupt, and I formed a new feel-good ritual to start my day with in the place of my old habits. Exercise habits work especially well for this purpose because they improve the chemical state of your brain as well as interrupting your old bad habits. But anything new that forces you out of a rut can also work well. After first hearing about deep work, you might be tempted to try to act like a productivity machine by doing deep work all day long. This is flat out impossible. The ability to do really focused work is limited to a few hours a day even after a lot of practice. So after you've spent 3 or 4 hours in a day doing deep work, the rest of the work you do that day will be limited to shallow work that doesn't command a lot of your focus. At this point, your number one priority becomes resting and relaxing to restore your ability to focus for the next day. So get ready to relax like your life depends on it. You should actually add having real high quality fun to your schedule for the day, just like you would with an essential work task, because it's just as important to getting stuff done. To improve your ability to relax and recover, it's a good idea to have a ritual you use when you're finished being productive for the day, just like the one you used to start. As an example of this kind of finishing ritual, the author of Deep Work writes down a plan for the work he's going to do the next day and then says the phrase "schedule shutdown complete" to finish off his workday. Although I'd really recommend coming up with a phrase that sounds cooler than this, just so you can feel great when you're saying it. To succeed with this strategy, you need to completely commit to the idea that once you've said this phrase, your productive behaviour for the day shuts down, and that you won't allow anything stressful to command your attention from that point on. Because even slight interruptions to your recovery time will lessen the benefits you get from recovering your ability to focus completely for the next day. This way, when you stop working and start playing, you'll be able to have a lot more fun, because you'll actually be present in that moment, instead of feeling guilty the whole time because you didn't get any work done earlier and you're not actually meant to be playing right now. When you're completing each day, everything you do in your life will feel more enjoyable. Every video game you play will feel like a more epic adventure. Every book you read and movie you watch will seem more engaging because you're doing all of it on purpose. Thanks for watching, guys. I hope you enjoyed this video. There'll be more like it coming very soon, so subscribe if you'd like to see them. Have a great day.